Hi, and welcome to the Gleaning for the World Pastors Briefing, sponsored by the Gleaning Church Network. My name is Mike Tilley, and today's topic is Ebola and the Church. It'll be presented by the founder and president of Gleaning for the World, Ron Davidson. He'll take about 15 minutes to give you the background information and what's currently happening in West Africa and around the world so you can be empowered to help your congregations and be the expert in your community to answer questions. But if you'd like to ask questions during this presentation, we'll do a Q&A in the second half for about 10 minutes or so. And there are actually three options for you. You can see to the right of the video window, there's a social stream section, and you can actually have a dialogue going on in that area and ask questions. We'll get to those at the end of Ron's presentation. There's also a form at the very bottom of the page. You can scroll down and you'll see a form you can complete to ask a question, and we'll get those in as well. And then a third option is simply to join the Gleaning for the World Gleaning Church Network Facebook group page. It's an exclusive group of just pastors, and we're just getting that started, but you can also go in there and ask questions in the dialogue even after this event is over. Of course, this will be archived and available in the future, and you may want to return if you missed something or want to gather some additional facts. Ron's really good at giving some on-the-ground information from all the partners that we have in the region, so you might want to have a little notepad and jot down some of those things. And then as others are connecting, let me just remind you that our next pastor's briefing will be on December 18th, Thursday, December 18th at 10 a.m. Okay, it's time for Ron. We're going to go over to him now for today's topic, Ebola and the church.
It's good to have you sharing these conferences. For 29 years, I've pastored local churches, and I've been where you are, which gives me a great insight into how you have to prepare sermons every week and come up with new information. But in the last 16 years in directing Gleaning for the World, it has given me an opportunity to get reports on a daily basis that we often do not see on CNN, Headline News, and Fox and the rest. And some of the information is what we try to share with you as a pastor so that you can deal with the various crises that we see hitting around the world. The Ebola virus was actually discovered in 1976. They were checking a blood serum for yellow fever and found a virus that had never been seen before. Dr. Piot was the gentleman that actually discovered the Ebola virus, and his comment was that he had discovered the Ebola. Now I fear an unimaginable tragedy. That is without much question that at some point the Ebola virus will be spread worldwide. Most of the cases so far have been in Africa, where the first virus was discovered in Zaire. But we've also now had cases in the United States where doctors and others have been brought back to the United States that were infected. And then we had people infected by them, nurses and different ones. And the danger of it spreading beyond the Sierra Leone, Liberia area is significant. The Ebola virus carries a very high fatality rate. It runs between 70 and 80%. The virus itself starts out with flu-like symptoms and can often be misdiagnosed, and then it very rapidly becomes a very critical disease, a virus, because of the way that it affects the body. You have the diarrhea, the fever, the problems that you have with flu-type symptoms, and then it mutates and gets into the system, and literally the organs begin to bleed out. And most people die from the disease because of dehydration and because of the loss of body fluids and blood. And that's what really causes the death itself. The transmission of the disease is quite unusual. you can actually be a carrier of the disease for up to 20 days prior to coming down with the critical symptoms. So you can spread the disease among your family, your friends, your community uh, by simple things in any type of body fluid, from the tears that a person would have to coughing up mucus. Any of those things can be spread, and they can literally live on a doorknob or on a countertop. Um, they can live almost anything for about 24 hours. So the potential for spreading the disease among your family and friends is significant. The average person will only live about a week once the flu-like symptoms start, and then they become critical, and they live just a very short period of time. So it is a very, very contagious disease. And the people that are working with, the medical people that are working with the patients, and we've had about 14,000 cases of Ebola that have been reported so far, with about 5,000 deaths. Uh, but the ones that are working with it, we've lost almost 400 medical staff in Africa alone. And they already had a deficiency of medical care in developing countries. And then you have the loss of the doctors and the nurses. One doctor would, for every 70,000 people, is not unusual. Uh, then you remove some of those doctors, and you get a multiplying effect to where some of the people that have developed Ebola have had to go to 5 and 6 and 7 hospitals to even find a single doctor. The greatest concern with Ebola, according to the Center for Disease Control, is that this virus may become airborne. It has not at this point, thankfully. If it were to become airborne, it will be a lot more contagious. It will affect a lot more people. It will become a disease that is spread worldwide because we are a mobile society. And being mobile as we are, you could actually be able to pick up the virus, whether you're flying or on a train or anything else, if a patient is on there and leaves any body fluid behind. That has not become true at this point, but that the danger is always there. And they believe that before this virus is through, that it may well become airborne. We do not have any type of vaccine or antiviral drug that has been manufactured in a vast amount to where it's really going to affect the spread of this disease. Uh, they have been able to isolate the blood factors and people that have survived and are working on an antivirus that they will be able to use in the future, but that may well be several years down the line. You may also note that there's not been a great deal of conversation on the major news channels in the last couple of weeks because of uh, other issues that they have been reporting on. But the disease Ebola itself is still as rampant in Africa as it has been over the last 3 or 4 months, when there were almost hourly reports on it. So it has not changed. It has not decreased at all. In fact, it is continuing to increase. We have had our own medical people from our military that are trained in biohazard and that are trained in contagious diseases that are in the area now. And it may well be that the containment of Ebola is because of our military that are there. And we need to ask our people to be in prayer. They have put themselves in harm's way, some 3 or 4,000, and they're talking about sending several thousand more people over there. So we need to remember that these are the medical people that are over there now, that are Americans, that are trying to help uh, their families, their support system. We need to support them, but we also need to continually be in prayer with them. To show you how dramatic the problem is in developing countries, this box of exam gloves, which you've certainly seen in your doctor's offices and other places, has about 250 gloves in it. And for one hospital, the government in Sierra Leone or Liberia was only able to provide one box for the whole hospital. Now, in our facilities, we would probably use one box up easily in a day. And if you think of treating a couple of hundred patients and how many times you have to change gloves and how many times you need to protect your healthcare workers, one box of gloves is simply going to last them a day, maybe 2 days. We've been able, through Gleaning for the World, to provide a number of boxes and protective wear and other things to try to support the people that are on the ground. But the developing countries simply do not have the finances uh, to purchase large volumes of protective wear, and that's the reason we've lost so many healthcare workers. As a pastor, the question is, how can we help our people? What do we say from the pulpit to them? I noticed that when it was on the news on a regular basis, on an hourly basis, on CNN, Headline News, Fox News, and the other channels, that people in our community, the medical people in particular, became concerned about their children actually being in large groups, whether it be school functions or churches or events that were taking place, ball games, and they began drawing their children back. We have seen this same fear in Africa. The people in Sierra Leone and Liberia and other countries have stopped going to church or to synagogues or to the mosque. They've stopped going to work. They've stopped going to any community functions. They simply isolated themselves from everyone else, trying to keep their family from developing this disease. The effect on that in Africa has been to basically destroy the economy of these countries. If we were to see a spread of any kind in the United States, the fear of the disease itself is going to create tremendous economic problems. People may well stay away from your church. They may well stay away from your church gatherings simply because of the fear tactic that is a part of this thing. And quite honestly, I don't blame them one bit. But just be aware that if it were discovered more in the United States, that's one effect that you're probably going to need to deal with as far as your finances and the economics of your church. The other thing that we need to look out for, and we're in discussion with a local health department and as well as health departments across the United States. They're looking for support systems so that they have to isolate families. We're looking at 3 to 4 weeks that they're going to have to isolate these people. And they will need individuals, churches, community groups that are willing to take food to their houses because they're not going to be able to shop. They're not going to be able to go to school. They're not going to be able to go to work. They're going to be affected in an economic way. And the church can take food to the house, not go in, but take food to the house. They can support the children. They can do a lot of things for the families. So reaching out to your local health department to let them know that you're available is going to be important. The other thing that I would say to you is that if we were to see any type of spread in the United States and the fear is there, we need to help our people understand that the greatest instrument that they have as a born-again believer is prayer. To pray for the victims, to pray for the healthcare workers, and to pray for their own protection. God listens to the faithful prayers. He listens to his people. And being able to lead your people in community prayer and worship gatherings, being able to lead them perhaps over the internet, if they're not willing to come to church, being able to reach out to our people and know that there is a God that is sufficient. There is a God who is capable of stopping the spread of this disease. There is a God that loves his children regardless of where they live and what race they are. There is a God that cares about the Muslims, the Jewish people, the Buddhist and groups, religious groups that are in these countries. And we can do a great deal of good simply by reaching out to the children that we have from our church. And I'm talking about children of all ages, to lead them in the prayers which will give them a security that they're going to need. So right now we do not see a massive spread in the United States. We hope to God we don't. But if it does, the pastors are going to be some of the strongest community leaders to help touch the lives of the people, which is the best form of evangelism that we can possibly have. Now we want to turn to some of your questions and see if we can provide some answers for you so that you can be able to better pastor your people if the virus were to spread.
Yeah, Ron, we have a few questions here. And of course, there are three ways that you can ask questions. One of them is simply to use the little social stream section to the right of your video window, and you can type that in. You can also go to the bottom of the page, scroll all the way down. There's a little form you can fill out and ask questions, or go to the Facebook group page. There's a link there for that, and you can simply use that as a way to ask questions as well. Ron, one question is, you mentioned there's one doctor for every 70,000 patients over there that are having some kind of issue. Is the UN not involved? Is there not some sort of group effort to try and solve the problem?
The UN is involved, and they are doing all that they can to try to hold up the country's economy and also try to provide medical care. When you're looking at 14,000, and we have to realize when we say that there are 14,098 cases, these are developing countries. The best guess that the United Nations has at this point is that the number of people that have truly been affected could be as much as 3 to 4 times the 14,000. So they are working through the International Monetary Fund, through various arms of the United Nations, to try to support economically the countries that may well fail, to help them politically and to help them medically. But if the spread continues in Africa, we're going to see a dramatic effect on these countries. And one of my greatest concerns is that with ISIS becoming so prominent, they are beginning to move into these countries that have been destabilized. And if they were to take these countries over, it could have a tragic effect on what's happening in the safety of America, as well as the various countries in Africa, with ISIS being able to continue their genocide.
There have been, several people who've been cured, I guess, here in the U.S. How is that possible, and is there sufficient medical supplies or medicine or whatever to continue to provide that kind of solution for people?
The United States federal drug we're experimenting with a vaccine, if you will. And we were able to utilize that on the first people that came in, and it had very positive effect. That has not been produced in mass. They're also working on an antiviral medication now using the blood of the survivors to be able to make a vaccine, but it will take years to make a vaccine that is effective and to produce it in large quantities to where it can make a difference. So when you're looking at one doctor and sometimes it's one nurse for every 70,000, there are sections of these countries where you have one medical care for every 250,000 people. And I know from the field, one report that we had is a family came down with Ebola. At least they thought that's what it was, and it was. And they had to go to 5 hospitals before they found a single healthcare worker, much less one that was willing to treat them. So that's one of the problems that we're seeing, and why the disease continues to spread is there's simply not enough healthcare workers or as I said earlier, supplies to be able to protect the healthcare workers that are there.
If you'd like to ask a question during today's video event, use that little social stream section over to the right of the video window, or you can go to the very bottom of the page and fill out that form, or go to the Facebook group page. There's a link on our site there that you can connect if you have a question you'd like to ask. This will be video archived and up on the site next week. So you'll have an opportunity to refer back to it if you have any questions today. One question, Ron, is are there any visible symptoms that the average person would see in someone else in order to recognize that they possibly would have Ebola?
Well, we've got such a long incubation period of 20 days, and that allows people that may have some flu type symptoms to literally move around their community, do whatever, and we would not know. Homeland Security in the United States is now testing anyone that comes from an infected country, and they're able to test the fever of the people to see if they have a fever, and if they are, then they begin to be isolated. So it's very, very difficult to be able to tell a person that has Ebola from someone that doesn't while they're still contagious.
You were talking about the box of gloves that you demonstrated there earlier. So that box of gloves is supposed to, it seems like that alone would cause a little bit of the spread of the disease. I mean, not having sufficient medical supplies.
Not having protective wear and medical supplies has already caused over 400 deaths of medical care workers where there's already a deficiency. We're seeing now that the healthcare workers are getting affected and are developing Ebola from the patients. Um, Groups like Samaritan's Purse, Mary Cares, Gleaning for the World, and others are getting protective wear into Africa to support these countries. But the lack of protective wear is the way that you not only transmit it to the healthcare workers, but you transmit it to your community, you transmit it to other people in the hospital, and it becomes a major source of contamination. So it has been a real problem trying to get supplies in because a lot of the customs agents and dock workers are not going to work. So getting containers of supplies in has been a real tricky situation for us.
Ron, what's been a last question really because of time, but what's been the church's overall response so far to this, specifically to West Africa, but this whole Ebola virus? Has the church stepped up and responded?
The church in Africa, in the smaller communities, have been the support system for the people that have been ill, for their families. Uh, I think that not only the Christian church, but people of other faiths have been able to step in because of their religious conviction. And many of our um, workers, international outreach and others, have actually put people from the United States on the ground as missionaries to be able to share the gospel and to teach the people about a God that truly loves them. So the church is there, it is functional, it is working, but again, uh, there's a lot more that we can do, even to help our own people before a contamination takes place in the United States.
Okay, thanks, Ron. I appreciate it. We're out of time for today's video presentation, the Gleaning for the World Pastor Briefing. Remember, our next one will be December 18th at 10 a.m. That's a Thursday. We're always doing these on the third Thursday of every month. So we hope you'll plan to connect back with us there as we get closer to Christmas. And don't forget, this one will be video archived shortly. You can return later and view it. And again, we do ask that we do this for pastors, to empower pastors and give you information from the ground so that you know how best to answer questions with your congregation. So we hope you've enjoyed today's topic, Ebola and the church. For Ron, I'm Mike Tilley. It's been good to be with you today. Hope you have a great day.